We out here.
That's all. That's my picture better than that. Hey.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to our Counterpoise podcast. I am one of your three co-hosts. I'm Samantha Adams.
Hi, guys. I'm another one of the co-hosts. I'm Malik Foster.
And I am Everett Stevenson, one of your last co-hosts of this show. And this week we have an interesting topic. We are here to discuss gun control in America. In particular, we've had a recent shooting that just took place in the last week, along with numerous other shootings that have taken place over the past few years. And we just kind of wanted to talk about that issue, touch on it, discuss maybe some things that we think that can be done to counter some of these activities that have been taking place over the years, and see if we can open up a discussion in which we could try to address this issue that has been plaguing our nation. So today we have a few videos that we're going to discuss. One of them, which I'm getting ready to pull up here momentarily, shows an example, or excuse me, a speech that President Obama did in lieu of a gun shooting, in lieu of a pub mass murder that took place during his presidency. This is a clip that was uploaded onto YouTube, and it will be here momentarily.
Yeah. While he's pulling that up, I remember that. I think this one was the one that was in Newtown. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it was the one Sandy Hook. I think that it was. But yeah, I just remember him being really, really upset about it. But here it is.
Inalienable right to life and liberty and pursuit of happiness. Those rights were stripped from college kids in Blacksburg and Santa Barbara, from high schoolers at Columbine, and for first graders in Newtown.
Wow, it's kind of crazy. You see, he's getting choked up here.
Mm-hmm. I mean, first graders, I mean, they were babies.
Never a man or loved one would be taken from our lives when I was born.
I had a hard time hearing him.
Guys, just 1 second. We're going to restart this video. Just 1 second. Would you guys go ahead and discuss some things?
Yeah, because we're having some technical difficulties. Everybody can't really hear the video. Well, he works on that. But Obama was very, very upset. I mean, if you guys remember what happened out there in, I think it was Newtown, Connecticut. I think it was coined the Sandy Hook shooting, because I think the name of the school was called Sandy Hook, if I'm not mistaken. And what happened there was, it was a guy, he had mental health issues. His mother worked at the school, and he went in there and he went on a rampage and he shot up the school. He shot babies, the children, 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds,
right.
3-year-olds, like just.
It was an elementary school at that, so that was one of the most traumatizing.
Right, so there were kindergartners there. Right, there were kindergartners in there and everything. So, it was very troubling. I mean, any kind of mass shooting is going to be troubling, right? But you start talking about shooting up children, small children who haven't even had the opportunity to live their lives. It's very, very troubling. And you see former President Obama clearly upset about it. You can go ahead, E. You're on mute, E.
Okay, so we're good now. I think the volume should be a little better.
Okay.
It gets me mad. And by the way, it happens on the streets of Chicago every day. So, all of us need to demand a Congress brave enough to stand up
Amen to that one.
to the gun lobby's lies.
Mm.
All of us need to stand up and protect its citizens. All of us need to demand governors and legislators and businesses do their part to make our communities safer.
Absolutely.
We need the wide majority of responsible gun owners who grieve with us every time this happens and feel like your views are not being properly represented to join with us to demand something better.
And I think that's critical. The actual real life gun users have to speak on it.
Mhm. Yeah, this video is over. So, you know, the thing that I found to be incredibly important about something that he said is he also touched on Chicago, right? A lot of times when you talk about gun control, you hear about it more so in the wake of a mass shooting, right? But that's not the only time, you know, the I guess for lack of a better term, the lack of gun control affects any community, not just our community, but when you talk about the community at large, talking about the Black community, we're definitely affected by the lack of gun control. Or I don't even know if it's necessarily that, it's just that the way that gun control laws are put up, are put out there and the way that they affect the Black community. We can touch on that a little bit, like for a second, but before I have an example I want to give, but I don't want to give it until we give a little credence to what President Obama was talking about with regards to shooting up that Sandy Hook thing when those children were murdered by the mass shooter out there.
I think that one was super, super troubling because of the fact that it was just like, you know, again, this is something that happened with very young children. I know a lot of times it's not that it makes it better. Anytime a person loses their life, regardless of their age, it's a tragedy. However, especially if it's at the hands of another, you know, natural causes, things of that nature, that's one thing. However, when it's cut short due to someone else taking another life, you know, that isn't always the best situation. So I think when we saw that situation, it kind of hit home because it was like, here we are, we have a young man who ran into a school, senselessly murdering, you know, multiple people for no real apparent reason at that point. And you know, the president has said something I think was kind of interesting, and it kind of goes toward the few things. He said a couple of things that I thought that we can touch on as well. One of the things that we definitely look to touch on is congressional action towards combating gun violence. And I know that's something that we're going to discuss later on in the show. So I'm going to hold off on that caveat for just now and discuss the one thing that he said as well. The other thing that I thought was interesting, which was the comment stating that all legal gun owners should look to voice their opinions of opposition against these type of crimes and for more gun control laws to prevent these things from happening. But if I'm not mistaken, that individual who had that gun actually legally owned the gun. If that for Sandy Hook, did he receive that gun illegal?
I think he may have. Oh, yeah, he did legally own it, but I think it exposed one of the loopholes that they wanted to try to close with regards to one of the mandates that they wanted to create when they tried to pass a bill through and it didn't pass, which was background checks.
Well, I do want to say this though. A lot of states do enforce background checks. I think that the issue is though, it doesn't necessarily look into the capacity of necessarily like mental health and in
Right.
regards to not necessarily saying that a person can't be mentally insane or have illnesses that shown that they weren't stable, but more so about past issues with mental health. So we could look at like anger issues coming up. I think that's something the conversation that should be on, that there should be a more of a stringent look into the details of an individual. And I'll counterphrase that with when we look at, say, a person who's getting ready to go on death row, they do a thorough investigation as to that person's background. They look at school records. They look at things of these natures to see how did they perform, growing up? Were there other issues that kind of shown them? These are like factors to show that if they meet a certain criteria of point wise, at least in the state of Florida, if they meet a criteria of point wise, then they will be eligible to be deemed to be able to be going on death row because they have a certain level of points. And those points go off of things such as mental illness, previous issues. They take into consideration how a person grows up, things of that nature. And so I think if we can have more stringent investigations into individuals and not just a basic, okay, you're not a felon, you're not, you know what I'm saying, you haven't committed any crimes or anything like that, so you can get it passed, and maybe go into issues of where if there was a checkered issue in the past, that this kind of can stay on a person's individual account so that people know, okay, well, maybe we need to do a little thorough research on this individual because they have had issues with anger issues within the past, whether it was, bullying and fighting in school or showing anger issues within working with others on the job, whatever the case may be. So those are things that I think would help counter this issue of making background checks a little more thorough before we provide guns to individuals within this nation.
Yeah, I think you brought up an interesting point with that background check issue. I think it's sad to say, but I feel like victims of police brutality, these killings of unarmed Black men and women and children, they go into a more thorough background check of them than they do of gun owners. So I think that's an important thing to note. Like, that's crazy. Because in some states, all you have to do is not have any felonies or anything like that, and you're good to go, pretty much. When you're trying to register a gun, there's no universal background check. Some places are more strict than others. I know New Jersey is pretty strict, and New York, but a lot of states, you just, you walk in, you order, and then 2 days later, you're able to walk out with a gun. So that's one way. I know they've been talking about banning online sales of guns. I don't know if I'm a big fan of that. I mean, you still got to purchase the gun somehow, right? I think that's a little bit of infringing upon the Second Amendment because you're kind of really restricting people on purchasing guns that way. That's just me, because online sales are really big. So that's a big thing that you're doing on restricting, but that's something that they proposed. I know that. And I think it's a money thing too when it comes to this, because every time there's like these mass shootings, people get fearful of new regulations on guns. So they're trying to buy all the kind of guns that they're afraid will be like blacklisted or taken away from the market or banned. So that's another thing too, like with the NRA and all these other gun associations, and for gun owners, anybody who makes their money by selling guns and trading in guns, they see an uptick in sales when these things happen because people get fearful. Especially when you're talking about banning all these assault rifles, people are trying to buy stuff left and right. I saw some articles about how gun sales were rising like a lot percentage, like a lot.
I know ammo is another big issue. Getting access to ammo.
Yeah. President Biden was talking about that as well, like ammo. Yeah, you're right. Go ahead. E.
Yeah, because remember at the top of the pandemic, everybody was going and buying guns, but they ran out of ammo at most places. A couple of things before we segue into the next clip.
Can I jump in here real fast about the ammo thing? One of the things that I do know is that like after one of the past killings, I think maybe a few months or maybe not even about 3 or 4 months ago, or not Amazon, excuse me, Walmart decided, and this is a private business that decided that they were going to no longer sell ammo in their stores. And I know that was one of the big things because this was like a big, retailer who also provided access to ammunition to a lot of individuals, especially in places all around the country. So that was one of the things that kind of made, scarcity of ammunition was one of the things that kind of has recently came about that makes it a little bit harder for gun owners to have access to these things.
Something that you had said earlier, I agree with as far as doing more thorough background checks, but the problem you run into is when you start violating people's HIPAA rights, right? Because if somebody has a mental health issue, now you're putting their medical history out there on display for them to be validated in whether or not they can receive a gun license. So,
I agree. That's something that we definitely would have to debate because I think what we have to weigh over individuals' privacy rights versus the potential threat of harm to the public. And I think when that's something that Congress may have to go over, especially if we can look at some studies of the individuals who may have committed these mass murders to see where their lines of or where their connections with mental illness with these shooters. If that is something that is the case, then I think that that's something that Congress and the nation should weigh against it in order to make the decision of seeing are we willing to value one thing over the other.
But I think that in fact is the reason, one of the reasons why the bill didn't pass back when Obama said something, back when this happened, that clip we just watched. Because remember, not long thereafter, they drafted up a bill and it didn't pass. And it didn't pass because, they were fighting. And it was like, but it's gun control. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not, I think it's more so the balancing test that becomes the problem. But then the other thing that you said, Malik, about the gun sales online, you think that might be a little infringing? I don't.
And the reason they'll make that argument. That's all.
But the reason why I don't think that that's very infringing is because people were buying guns before the internet. You're gonna find a way. If people want to get a gun, they're gonna find a way to get a gun. Like, for example, I had a clip, couldn't find it, was gonna show it to you guys, but pretty much, long story short, I think it was in Indiana as well. It's not against the law to possess a firearm. It's just without a license. It's just against the law to shoot a firearm without a license. And so there were these, I think it was 3 gentlemen, may have been 4. They were in their work truck driving. They were Black. And some white guy comes up with a gun, yelling racial epithets and shoots at them. Shot a couple of them. I think one of them may have passed away. One of the guys in the truck had a gun illegally. His was stashed under the seat. He grabbed it. He shoots back, shoots the guy in the butt. Police come. The white guy says, "Hey, these Black dudes was chasing me down, trying to kill me." Black dudes get arrested. White dude escapes from the hospital. Come to find out, when they did their investigation, they saw on like video cameras from like in the neighborhood and from the stoplights and traffic lights and stuff, that in fact was the other way around, that this guy was harassed, and witnesses. So with that being said, those guys, both guns were illegal, right? Because the white guy, they said that he bought his gun off of a drug addict. And it's a tough argument to have, because there's a lot of people out there that actually believe that gun control means take away guns or take away your right to have a gun. And that's not it. It's just, limiting the scope in which you can obtain one. When you think about any of our other rights that we have, they're all limited one way or another, like freedom of speech. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater, but I can tell somebody to go screw. You see what I'm saying? So with that being said, that's a segue into.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump off you real quick, but I just wanted to push back over a statement before it gets too far along. And that was one thing you said real fast, which was the HIPAA statement. That this may be a threat to people's privacy in regards to their health. And I think that's very interesting in lieu of today's society, when we're looking at maybe a lot of places are forcing individuals to have to show that they are vaccinated in order to maybe return to, like, I think they said, like, maybe for certain concerts, in order to go to stadiums and things of that nature, they may look to see if you have a vaccination and proof of vaccination. And so I think that's one thing that, you know, if we see that it can be done for groups of people, or if people have to give up certain privacy rights in order to attend events en masse, I don't think that it would be too much to ask that a person maybe have to waive, maybe, you know what I'm saying, if they choose to want to own a gun, this is maybe something that you may have to waive in order to own that gun, especially if you haven't been able to obtain one prior to this law going into effect. So I don't necessarily think that HIPAA should be an issue, but to go into what you're referring to in regards to, you know, bringing it up to date on the issue of gun control, we do have an article here from President Biden, in which it was a CNBC article. If someone wants to go ahead and just explain this one, whatever article this was.
Yeah, go ahead, Malik.
Okay,
You can do it.
so I'll just go ahead then.
Yeah.
Biden.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, there should be a video down there. We can take a look at that and do some commentary, I believe. Yep.
When you realize your trading firm is more call center than trading specialist, trade up to Schwab.
This is going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds.
Right.
Don't you hate when the thing spins like that?
Yeah, it's not loading either. I'm like, what's going on? You loaded
It's
that
seeing
all
it. It's seeing.
It's coming.
NBC. They be doing some. I don't know what video player they be using, but it's trash.
The idea is just bizarre to suggest that some of the things we're recommending are contrary to the Constitution. Gun violence in this country is an epidemic. Let me say it again.
So
gun violence in this country is an epidemic.
I think he said that in regards to the Second Amendment right. That's in the Constitution.
Right.
Yeah, but he is. But he's also talking about just how, I mean, you know, there's more gun violence here in America than there is anywhere else in the whole world.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, I got a shocking number for y'all in 1 second. I just want to hear what.
Sure that we understand and measure the problem of criminal gun trafficking in a data-driven way. Over 20 years ago,
and I mean,
undertook a gun trafficking.
Part of that research could be going into mental health of mass murder shooters.
Mm-hmm.
Criminal trafficking networks. No such.
At the end of the day, this is all about money. They keep, you know, fudging the issue and try to say, well, you know, this is a big issue. It's about money at the end of the day. They don't.
I mean,
they just don't want to say it.
It is a big issue, but everything is about money in this country. Everything.
But can also be made of plastic, printed on a 3D printer, or sold in self-assembly kits. Second, we will close a regulatory loophole that has contributed to the proliferation.
So I think he was referring to like the 3D printing guns machines that, you know, can print guns and require them to have a serial number on the guns that they print.
It also requires licensed firearms dealers to run background checks to ensure that individuals who are barred by law from purchasing firearms cannot do so. The emergence of ghost guns threatens both of these important law enforcement objectives. Third, we will make clear that statutory restrictions on short-barreled rifles apply when certain stabilizing braces are added to high-powered pistols. Federal law requires the taxation and registration of all short barrel.
So in regards to that, they're referring to like when you have like an AR, but you may have the barrel that's kind of shut off, so you can maybe get more shots off with in like a shorter space where it doesn't have to be, you know, straight direct. So you can kind of like have a smaller gun that has way more capacity to shoot more bullets.
One thing nobody's talking about, and I'll say it after this, but it relates to criminal justice reform as it relates to gun control.
Oh, here we go. The red flag laws.
These laws allow family members to temporarily block people from obtaining firearms if they are present danger to themselves or others.
I think that's nice. You know what I'm saying? If you know your nephew or your son or your daughter could be a threat to society.
But what if they're not, and you're the threat, and you just want to infringe? You know,
and I think that's why we might have to look to see about having, you know what I'm saying, that guideline. So it's just not your word that prevents someone.
And say, I want you to temporarily remove from the following people any firearm they may possess, because they're a danger in a crisis. They're presenting a danger to themselves and others. And the court makes a ruling. To put this in perspective, more than half of all suicides.
That burdens the court too, though.
Yeah, this flagship law actually relates to what recently happened in Indianapolis, actually, too.
Mm-hmm.
Due to the history of Brandon Hole, the shooter.
Mm-hmm.
Because real quick, well, let me see what Biden's saying.
I don't think that'll reduce suicides. People are gonna kill themselves if that's what they want to do. The president also announced that he is nominating David Chipman, I think that's what that says, to lead the Bureau of, I guess that was the ATF. Chipman will be the agency's first permanent director since 2015.
David Chipman to serve as the director of the AFT. David knows
Isn't it the ATF?
for 25 years. Vice President Harris and I believe he's the right person at this moment, this important.
We'll see.
Biden said cooperation from Congress.
We know that.
Yeah, because
Right.
without the independents and the Republicans, it's not going to get passed.
Highly doubt
And
that.
that's what the next thing says, without support from the Republicans.
And independents, because they're not for it, like both sides. Yeah, good luck, Mr. Biden. But yeah, what I was gonna say was with the flagship law, how that related to
The red flag, you mean?
the current, yeah, the red, is it red flag?
Yeah.
Red
Yeah,
flag
red
states.
Yeah, with the red flagship laws, how that related to the Indianapolis shooting recently, with Brandon Hoyle, is the fact that the FBI had interviewed him before because he had a gun and he was threatening to commit suicide. And, you know, they want family members, when they're aware of these things, to be able to prevent others from using guns in a destructive way, either on others or themselves. So that could help prevent some of these shootings in the future. That's the theory behind it, from my understanding. You know, of course, they're going to get pushback from the other side, like, hey, you might be infringing on that individual's rights, even with his family, to bear arms. You shouldn't be able to do that, yada, yada. So you might get pushback there, but I thought that was interesting. And another statistic that I found as I was researching this Brandon Hoyle situation in Indianapolis is that this was the 45th shooting since March 16th, 45th mass shooting.
That's crazy.
Where multiple people have been shot by somebody, right?
So,
So
1 month.
Yeah. So basically, in a month, it's been 45 of these where multiple people are dying by gun violence in this country.
You right there, Malik? Them allergies are kicking your butt.
Yep. I took my medicine, but my nose just bothered me.
Yeah.
But y'all can go ahead.
That's a lot. That's a lot. But the thing that I was gonna say is a whole criminal justice reform aspect that nobody is talking about, right? Because you have a situation where, so okay, in the state of Georgia, if you commit family violence battery as a misdemeanor, not because if it escalates to a certain point, it then becomes aggravated assault, which in some states is considered attempted murder. So if you commit family violence battery, right, and you are found guilty or you plead guilty, you cannot own a firearm federally. It's almost as if it's treated as if like a felony. You cannot own a firearm federally. Here's one of the issues. It makes sense. The law makes sense, right? Because you don't want people who are abusive to their family members to be able to obtain firearms later on and come back and shoot them, or anybody for that matter, right? But the problem is that what about those people that end up taking a plea because they can't afford to get out of jail, but they didn't really commit the crime, right? So then they become unable to get licensed or carry a firearm. That they lose that right, and then that follows them. They could potentially have more issues in the future as a result. You also have some people whose families are not stable. And so when you talk about having, like I touched on this a second ago, having family members, petition the courts to temporarily have people's rights restricted in being able to obtain guns if they believe that that person is a threat or danger to themselves or to others. It makes sense. The problem is, what if you're dealing with someone who's unstable? The court doesn't always know when people are unstable, right? Because I have a friend who was very mentally ill, and his family got him checked into a mental health facility to get himself together. He petitioned the court, and the court released him because they didn't think that he was a threat to himself or to anybody else. A couple months later, he killed himself. So, the court's not always going to get it right. And not only that, it burdens the court. It backs up the court as if the court isn't already backlogged enough. So, you run into those types of issues. It's very frustrating because something does need to be done, but what? And just like you said, Malik, good luck with that, banning assault weapons. I don't see that happening.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely the case. And I think because of the fact that it's so ingrained, it's one of the second, and I think that's what we saw President Biden say recently in that speech. It was like, this is a constitutional right, but we do have to find a way for us to kind of counter it, if you will, in a way, because of the fact that things are going on. But in regards to the fact that I don't think that it's going to be something that's going to be an all-out ban, we can also look at this next clip, in which is of President Biden speaking to a group of auto workers. And March of 2020 is when this video was released. So here's this clip.
I did not say that. I did not say that. Why were they like the other one? Because they're lying.
Wow, such harsh language, Mr. Biden.
Biden's old. He don't care.
Yeah.
He don't care. Once you get to a certain age, people don't care anymore. He says whatever's
Such
on his
harsh
mind.
language.
Yeah. But in his defense, the guy was accusing him of saying something that he never said, because you can't really hear them going back and forth, but that video is actually a little bit longer. And what happened in that exchange was the guy said that he was trying to take all of their guns away and their gun rights away. And Biden told him he was full of shit. And then he said, I'm not trying to do that. I'm a registered gun owner myself. I'm not trying to take away anybody's rights. What I'm saying is we need to have gun control laws, limit certain people from being able to get guns where they're out there harming others. Or why do you need 100-round clips? Like, if you're just trying to protect yourself and you only need one bullet to stop somebody, or maybe a couple, you don't need 100 round. You don't need empty 100 bullets off into somebody because they're coming at you. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's the point that he's making. I mean, and it makes sense. But
you might just though. I don't know who coming at me or who's all coming at me.
I mean, and you never know what circumstances you're gonna find yourself in, and that's the counter to the argument, right? You never know.
So, some people like to go hunting, Sam and E. Some people like to go hunting, and when you out there hunting, anything goes.
Right, and you don't have time to be loading up your gun like it's a friggin' bayonet. You know what I mean? Put down, like, one shot, boom. Okay, time to reload. Like, nobody has time.
One man militia,
Right. I mean, I get it. I get it. I get it. But something does have to be done. Because, like we said at the top of the show, there was a recent shooting out in Indianapolis, in Indiana, and a guy ran up in a FedEx. He was a worker, and he shot and killed 8 people. I think we have his photo, E. Don't we have his photo?
Yes, we do. And it is coming up here momentarily. So this young man was an individual whom, just 1 second, we get that photo up to you guys here shortly. But yeah, it was a video of a man who recently just did this, like maybe 2 or 3 days ago. I think we saw.
I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday or something.
It was very recent, very fresh.
Yeah.
And look at the young man. He looks like a young
man.
You know what I'm saying? To the point where we still even have an individual who looks as though like he's going through puberty or adolescence even. I don't know the man's age.
Yeah, he was only 19.
And I don't know if he said anything in regards to why this gentleman maybe had
bless you.
Why that gentleman might have what his motive may have been for the attack. However, nonetheless, whatever his issue or his gripe might have been, you know what I'm saying? We really want to urge like that violence in this capacity is not the way. And I think that's the main reason why we're having this show. In addition to trying to have conversations, which if you guys can come up with some ideas for yourself, please drop it down in the comments, let us know. We love to hear people's voices, but we're just here just coming up with some ideas that we think that Congress can maybe do in order to combat these things. And I know we've listed a couple of those things, such as more stringent background checks. We talked about also possibly limiting gun purchases to actual in-store purchases, which requires maybe an individual or sales rep to maybe get an actual visual look on a person. You can maybe see where they're at as far as presentation wise. Do they look like they may be going through things? Are they looking fidgety? You know what I'm saying? When they're coming in there, do they not look stable in the moment in which you go? Because I purchased a gun before, and I remember in store, and it was like you had to kind of go, you make your purchase, wait, then come back to go pick it up, and even if the guns didn't stop, you still have to wait 24, 48 hours, some time frame like that in order for them to do a check, in order for them just off, rip, you have to just wait so that you can't just buy a gun in the moment and then go shoot somebody because you mad in that moment. You know what I'm saying? Right. So that is some things that they do have currently that's in place, but there's some other things that we discussed and we have ideas for that also could work.
Yeah, people, if they want to kill a lot of people, they'll wait 2 days. It's been shown they'll wait 2 days, or the gun is already owned, right? So they already owned it, and so they can just do it right then and there. It's not like they're like, okay, I'm gonna go in here and purchase today. Like usually they purchase it and then it's like a week later or some days later. It's not like, okay, I just walked out of here fresh out with the guns, typically, right? But with the ban on online sales, like due to the pandemic, I feel like that would be a hard uphill battle for the Democrats to try to get through because if I was gonna be like, look, all right, maybe we could settle on some limited magazines, some regulations with that, but online sales that's cutting into the pockets because maybe primarily these companies' sales are online and they're gonna of course have their lobbyists come through like, hey, here's some more money for you Republicans, Independents, hey Democrats, here's some cheese too. So this ain't gonna go through because we need them online sales, especially with the pandemic. People aren't going out like that. People aren't shopping in stores like that like they used to. So online sales is basically gonna be the new in person because of everything. Maybe you have to hop on a Zoom, maybe or virtual like video chat. You know, maybe that could be an alternative. Like, hey, you have to actually go on a virtual video chat. Maybe you have to go through like a little evaluation for 30 minutes or an hour or something like that. Maybe that could be proposed. But that's just my take on it. You got something, Sam?
Yeah, another thing that they could potentially do is training. I know in some states, I think Massachusetts, you have to do a certain number of hours of some type of training. I don't really remember what it is, but yeah, they could also require training because aside from just being able to purchase a gun, you should be a responsible gun owner, right? Those are two different things because you have anybody that doesn't have a felony, for the most part, should be able to, can go out and buy guns, with the exception of people, like I said, here in Georgia, if you have a misdemeanor family violence battery, you can't. And I'm pretty sure there's similar laws in other states as well. But when it comes to that, you also have to be a responsible gun owner because you can't be all willy-nilly with it, leaving it all out. Kids can get to it, whether it be they end up shooting their little baby sister or baby brother or their mother or their father by accident or taking the gun to school, or you know what I'm saying? Like so many things can happen. And also too, if you don't know what you're doing with the gun, you probably shouldn't have one. You know what I mean? Because the guns, yes, guns don't kill people, people kill people, but you have to be a responsible person in order to have a gun. You know what I mean? Otherwise, tragedy can strike, and nobody wants that. That's one thing I wanted to make sure I put out there. The other thing is, although I believe that we need to make sure that something is done, I don't really know what, because there's a legitimate argument on both sides of the table. It is a huge balancing act, but I do believe that Congress should be able to figure something out. It's just a matter of whether or not they do and whether or not there's been enough money thrown at the problem.
I just think they need to come to a compromise, basically. You got anything on it?
No, I think my closing thoughts on it would be so that I would urge Congress to strongly look into this issue, in particular the issue of trying to set more stringent background checks. Again, I think we also talked about something that could help with also having maybe like a reference check or something like that. Individuals that you maybe have to kind of have vouch for you. Maybe even have it as almost like a liability thing, which I think it would be kind of tough. But if you have a person who reference for you and then that person is now going to not be willing to maybe put their name out there because they know, like, I'm only responsible for you if you're going to do this. If I think that you may have an issue, that could mess up my right, and I also can be held liable for the things that take place. I think then you would really have individuals have to either one, be very mindful of it, and then two, the people who would sign up are going to be very particular as to who they give their vouch for, because they know that criminal liability may also come down on them if this person decides to act in a manner in which they don't, or act in a manner that can be counterproductive to society. So that's something that I think that would be a way to actually combat maybe a lot of unstable individuals from receiving a gun is if they had to have someone maybe vouch for them. And if they know, like, you know, everyone knows that you're crazy. You've been crazy your whole life. You know what I'm saying? You've had temper tantrum issues your whole life. And if that individual knows that they vouch for this person and they do something that's off the wall, that they could be held liable, I know that's something that's going to help. And I reference that only from the standpoint of, I remember being in college, and we used to have this rule where, like, as an athlete, where on our teams, we break down it into individual positions. In our position teams, if one person did something, we all were held accountable. So if one person missed class, if one person was late, if one person did anything, the whole group was held accountable. And what that does is it makes it, now you're not going to mess up, because if I mess up, it's not just me messing up. I mess everybody up. And so now if I, you know, do something, it's not just I'm throwing my life away, I'm throwing my family's life away. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but
And
the thing
whoever
about
else-
it is, just a little pushback on that though, E, although I think that that's a good idea in theory, when you're talking about certain people don't care. They don't care who they mess up. And also too, you also deal with the issue of coercion, right? Because if you have a situation where somebody has to vouch for you, you don't know what the nature of that relationship is and whether or not the voucher, right, is being coerced into vouching, you know, so you run into other issues there. And I just think that, it's one of the toughest things about some of the laws that we have. They're pretty blanketed, and I get why, right? Because you can't really tell who's who, and you got to do something. But the problem is, so much falls through the cracks, or so much gets caught in that web rather than falling through the cracks. So much gets caught in that web that probably shouldn't be there. And so that's the reason why I say, like, the entire conversation about gun control, there's a whole aspect of criminal justice reform that that's attached to it that a lot of times people don't really, you know, discuss. So
Yeah. Also, you know, people are gonna complain like, oh, I have to have this other person essentially act as insurance. I don't want them to be. That's infringing on my rights. You know, it wasn't like this
before.
Why are you adding new regulations to gun measures? You know, so they're gonna definitely take that to the Supreme Court and be like, nah, that's not gonna fly. They're gonna make the argument, but you know, essentially what you're saying is the people are acting like a sort of like an insurance policy, so to speak. Like, okay, if this person messes up, you know, you're going to take the fall too, whether it's, you know, monetarily speaking or something like that. So maybe instead of like a person,
we have that same
maybe
situation
instead
when
of,
we deal
go
with
ahead.
kids driving cars, right? Like if a teen drives a car and they, you know, cause a fatality or something like that, not only is that kid gonna be liable, but also that parent who provided that car for them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's where the insurance come in. So you're thinking of like maybe a gun insurance, like a people's insurance, like
But
basically.
yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that insurance, like, because don't get me wrong. Yes, insurance will also cover and pay for some of the damages, but that family also will be held liable as well. For
Like
that child on
criminally
the
or
civil side of the
financially?
game.
Oh, civilly. Okay.
Yeah, on the civil side of the game as well. You know what I'm saying? And it could, depending on the type of damage that took place, it could also be on the criminal on the criminal side, as far as like negligent manslaughter and things of that nature. So it all varies, but I think that you can look at the situations and go. But I also think that I agree, it doesn't necessarily have to be that you have to have a lot of people to vouch for you, or that an individual who doesn't vouch for you could prevent you from necessarily doing it. But I think that it's another check and balance that will go to make the process for obtaining these guns a little more stringent and prevent maybe individuals who we know should be unstable from just being able to walk in there and get a gun because maybe they didn't have any major issues, you know what I'm saying, that were documented during their school days, and they haven't necessarily been locked up for any of their arguments or aggressive behaviors that they may have displayed. So that's why I brought that up. It's not necessarily saying it's a sure-through plan, but I do think that it's something that could also help slow this issue down. Because I think once you have more people who have to have more accountability in issues, what I've learned from my lifetime is that will definitely help combat things. I do agree, Sam. There are some people who just won't care, who will just do the things that they do. But unfortunately, that's why I think it's behooving to the individuals who vouch for that individual to be forthcoming and say, you know what, I already know how you get down. No, I'm not putting my name on here. Now, you're right. There may be something where they might coerce them and, well, if you don't do this, then I'm gonna stop paying for that, or I'm gonna do this, or whatever the case may be. And I think that maybe Congress can combat that again. I don't want to go back and forth with this whole thing, but I think that that's something that can be combated on the back end, where maybe it could look like it's an administrative decision that maybe went through to protect the individual who maybe want to remain, you know what I'm saying, not identify as his. Again, I know one of the biggest things that we talk about a lot of times is due process, right? So if you're going to deny a person the right to something, they at least should receive notice as to why they're being denied. And so, when it goes to that issue, if there's nothing that maybe that the board or whomever is responsible for this issue sees that would be a potential disaster, besides the fact that they have a public, maybe they could have a situation in which they have it where they state that the individuals can have a hearing in which, people can come up and speak about it, or people can leave messages or something like that, in which they can address what the issue is, so that if maybe a person does feel that way and they feel like they do need to counter them, they can give more detail as to why it is that they think that this individual should not be presented with this. And then
let me ask you a question, E, real quick about this. So do you think that the person who vouches for you, so do you think they should be, so do you think like you actually being awarded the gun license or the gun permit or the gun should be contingent upon their approval or their vouching or their signing off? Do you think that should be the case based off of what you're saying?
Yes, I think that like that person that you choose to vouch, they should say, I agree. I think that this is a person who is fit and sound and capable of adequately maintaining the responsibilities of owning a gun. And if that person vouches and feels that way, great. If that person doesn't feel that way, this could be like a voucher that you maybe send to them through email or something like that. They don't necessarily have to sign off on an application or anything like that. They can do that. It can be a private situation in which the individual in which they maybe who submitted their names, doesn't necessarily have to have access to that person's, their sponsors, if you will, application. So they might not necessarily have to look over and read it, but that person who maybe they might have asked to vouch for them can say, I don't think that this is the person because of X, Y, and Z reasons. And then if that's something that the board deems to be a valid enough reason, then they can say, based off of, public perception, whatever the case may be, we don't feel that this is the best situation. And again, once they do that, they can start, when they have someone maybe who does this, it could trigger a process. Maybe they go back and do a more of a thorough background. So now they gotta go looking into maybe this person's, school records. Maybe they start going into looking into maybe this person's, on job performance records, things of that nature. So I don't know. I mean, it's just a suggestion, but I think it's something that we could try to do to push the thought forward and try to work together for some of the other brighter minds of this world to come to a solution in which, hey, hey, we got this issue.
And I think that's part of the red flag law, right? Because remember, President Biden said, you can have families say whether or not they think a person should be able to have a firearm. And then on top of that, they would have to go through an entire hearing about it, like a competency type hearing, I mean, I get it. But the problem is that there are already so many guns out there that if somebody wants a gun, if they are told no, they can't have one, they're still going to go get it from somebody somewhere else. And I think that that's also another aspect of it that it's not really being addressed. I don't know why, but it is what it is, and again, I'm not against gun ownership. I'm just for responsible gun ownership. You know what I mean? That's my final thought. I'm just for responsible gun ownership, and there's got to be a way that Congress figures out how to allow for responsible ownership and not infringe on people's right to bear arms or on any other right that they have at the same time. So, I mean, that's just my final thought. I think that they just need to figure out that balancing act, that balancing test, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I like E's idea. It's kind of a broader scope of the flagship laws that Biden proposed, where your family puts a temporary ban on you. I guess your voucher will put a temporary ban on you. How it will work, right? Maybe a 30 to 90-day ban or whatever. And then as they do a more thorough background check and research, and they determine, okay, you are of sound mind, or you would make as a qualified gun owner, more likely than not, after an evaluation, you're good to go. So I think that's kind of how you think it should work. I think that's what you were trying to explain without going through all the details. But I personally think that has little to no shot of getting through Congress as it currently is constructed. I think you would need an overwhelming majority Democrats, and even then, at that point, they still probably wouldn't pass it, right? Because Republicans and the Independents probably will vote against it. And you probably will find some mildly conservative Democrats that would vote against it as well. So that's my thoughts on it. But I do like the idea. It's better than what we have. I mean, anything's better than what we currently have to be. We do have an article here. I'll pull it up real quick. It's about Texas. Let me show you guys. Texas, they basically they're voting to have permitless open carry. Basically, here we go. Can y'all see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they just recently voted this yesterday, actually, in the Texas House, the state house here in Texas. Well, not here, but in Texas, because I'm based out in Georgia. But I'm pretty sure this is going to pass through the Senate. And basically, what this is a bill to where you don't have to have a permit anymore to open carry. You can open carry. So I think that's crazy pushback on in light of what is going on, especially with the whole shooting in Indianapolis, the shooting in Colorado, the shootings in Georgia, all the shootings, all 45 of them since March 16th, according to CNN. It's been that many. So I think that's a crazy number. And I think Texas pushing this out at the time it's pushing it out is very bold.
Hold on, Malik. Is it to open carry or conceal carry?
I think it's open. Hold on.
Because Georgia already has that rule. Like, you don't necessarily need a gun permit to conceal a weapon. You need a permit to conceal it. Yeah.
To unconceal. But that's the whole reason of the Second Amendment, because everyone has a right to own a gun. You feel what I'm saying? That's the constitutional right. But to own that gun and to conceal that gun is a whole other story.
Yeah. Basically, it's permitless carry. What I'm reading here, if it's not already, this says it will eliminate the requirement for Texas residents to get a license to carry handguns if they are not already prohibited by state or federal law from possessing a firearm.
So it just doesn't say.
Yeah, it's pretty ambiguous there, but I did see some other things that said like open carry, like they don't have to have a permit for that anymore as well. But
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I mean, and I think the timing of this proposal is off.
So basically, you can have a pistol, Sam, on your hip. You don't need a permit for it, and you're just walking around with it. Usually, you would need a concealed carry license or something like that. You don't need that anymore. That's basically what it's.
Well, I mean, in Georgia, you can do that. You know what I'm saying? If I want to walk down the street.
But the timing of this law, though.
That's what I'm saying. The timing of this proposal.
That's what I'm saying.
It's kind of disgraceful. But like in Georgia, if I want to walk around with a rifle, I'm not really violating the law, unless I'm pointing it at people. Of course, I'm going to get stopped. you know,
Yeah,
and they're
because
gonna ask me 1,000 questions, you know, and if I have a license and I haven't violated any laws,
okay, I can stop sharing.
you know,
There we
they're
go.
gonna just tell me to go home. So,
Yeah.
you know, the thing about this is my final thought, and I think we can go ahead and wrap up. But my final thought is this: you know, we all have a Second Amendment right to carry. We should be responsible. And these mass shootings have been happening for quite some time, and our government has continuously failed to fix it. It's not going to be perfect. There's nothing's perfect. You know, I mean, perfection is just an illusion. But not only is it not going to be perfect, but and it's still going to continue to be gun violence. But the goal is to mitigate or minimize the gun violence that already takes place, especially when you're talking about these crazy mass shootings where kids are just trying to go to school and they're getting shot up at school. Now they're getting shot up trying to go grocery shopping, or now even including that at work as well. So I think that Congress has to figure out something, and just letting everything just go like how it's going ain't working. There's clearly a break in the system and it needs to be fixed. And you can't put a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. So they have to do something. Even if they leave it to the states. The problem is if you leave it to the states, then it's just going to be a mess, because some states are, I'm going to get my gun, and some are like, no guns. You know what I mean? So there has to be a balance. And that's just my final thought. They got to figure it out, and it has to be some sort of a balance. Eh?
I agree with you guys. You know, we definitely talked about this issue for in depth today. I feel like, you know, we gave some hypothetical situations in which we think that Congress could move in that direction. Definitely know that, you know, as Congress likes to do, studies, research, then maybe come with something before they likely like to move on issues. So who knows how this actually may plan out, but I definitely think that it's a great start for it, and that this is something that can be addressed. I just want to say in closing of my thoughts, you know, one, please check us out on Wednesdays on the Counterpoise podcast page. We have our What's Up Wednesdays that we do live.
On IG.
Did I say?
No, you just
okay.
didn't say IG. That's all.
Okay, yeah. Check us out on IG. We do that on our Counterpoise podcast. Going live every Wednesday, just talking about, you know, anything that's going on in society, whatever any of the family and the community want to discuss. We open to any, you know, conversation and whatever you want to bring to the table. So we also allow people to come join into the conversation, join us, be a part of the panel or the discussion. Lastly, I'm so sorry. Lastly, please follow me and the show on IG. My Instagram handle is thatguy2104. The show is Counterpoise Podcast. You also can find us on YouTube. We're going live on Facebook. So if you had a chance to see this, or if you've seen it somewhere else, we're also on Facebook. We have a page as well as a topic page. You guys know the difference within the Facebook, but we have 2 pages on Facebook, is my understanding. So either or, you can follow us. Want to thank you guys for your support, and on this issue, such a issue that's relevant and trying to keep going, and so there's something we may address in the future. But thank you guys, appreciate it, love you all. To my final co-host.
Yeah, let me make sure I give y'all my handle, and we'll pass it to Malik so he can close this out. If you guys want to follow me, you can follow me on Facebook at Samantha Adams -ESQ. If you want to follow me on IG, that's Samantha Renee 77_ESQ. And again, like E said, check us out, follow us, like us, comment, pop in, and check us out.
Yeah, guys, you guys can follow me at Malik M. Foster at Facebook, Instagram, whatever, Twitter, all that stuff. All the social media is the same, Malik M. Foster. Also, if you guys want us to discuss something in particular, specifically for What's Up Wednesday, let us know. We can talk about it. That's usually the form we use to have more of a free, open discussion on things. This show on Saturdays is usually pre-planned, but Wednesdays we kind of more broad. So just let us know. You can drop a comment, like, and let us know, DM us, whatever you need to do. So that's all I really have for us. And thanks for watching. And let me take us home. Thank you guys. We out here.
Wait a minute. Top.
All right, guys. Out.